The colony of Vorth Prime always smelled like rust, smoke and fear. Every corner of the slave district felt cold and empty. Metal walls were covered with old stains, and loud machines hummed like angry beasts. In this dark place lived a mother named Lyra and her little daughter Mira. They were part of the lowest class of alien workers, the ones no one cared about. Every day they were pushed, insulted, and treated like objects. But the worst cruelty of all was the food they were given. Expired rations meant only for the unwanted. Lyra sat in the corner of a dirty storage hut, holding a small metal tray in her hands. The food on it was greenish, thick, and smelled like rotten fruit. She forced a small smile when Mira looked at her. "Eat slowly, my child," Lyra whispered, trying to keep her voice calm. Mira touched the food with her small fingers and frowned. "It hurts my stomach, Mama," she said softly. Lyra's heart broke, but she pretended everything was fine. She could not show fear, not in front of her daughter. Outside, guards walked by, laughing loudly. Some of them looked through the metal bars and pointed at Lyra and Mira. "Look at them," one of the guards said. "They eat garbage because that is all they deserve." The others laughed, their voices sharp and cruel. Lyra looked down, trying to ignore them. She gently pushed the food toward Mira. "Just a little, Mira," she whispered. "You must stay strong." Mira took a small bite, her face tightening as she swallowed. Her tiny body shook for a moment, and Lyra felt panic rising inside her chest like a hot flame. She wanted to scream, to cry, to protect her daughter. But she stayed quiet because slaves who made noise were punished. Lyra brushed Myra's hair gently, pretending everything was normal. But inside her heart, she felt like she was breaking apart piece by piece. High above the slave district, a metal walkway stretched along the wall. A human officer named Captain Rylan walked across it. He was doing a routine inspection of the colony's lower levels. Most humans ignored the suffering here, but Rylan noticed everything. He had the kind of eyes that saw pain even when others looked away. He walked slowly, scanning the area below him. And then he stopped. His breath froze inside his chest. Down below, he saw Mira suddenly fall forward, her small body collapsing onto the metal floor. The rotten food tray clattered beside her. Lyra screamed but covered her own mouth quickly, afraid the guards would hear. Rylan gripped the railing tightly, his eyes widening with shock. He felt anger burn in his chest like fire. This was not an accident, and he knew it. This was cruelty, pure cruelty. Something inside him snapped. He rushed down the stairs toward the slave zone. Guards tried to block him as soon as he reached the bottom. "Human," one of the guards said, "this area is restricted." Rylan ignored him and pushed forward. His voice was sharp and cold. "Move." The guards hesitated, surprised by his tone. Rylan stepped past them without waiting for permission. His boots echoed loudly against the metal floor as he walked toward Lyra and Mira. Lyra looked up at him with fear in her eyes. She pulled Mira into her arms protectively, as if trying to shield her from him. Rylan knelt beside them, his face softening. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said in a low voice. He placed 2 fingers on Myra's neck, checking her pulse. Then he removed a small medical patch from his pocket and placed it on her skin. The patch glowed faintly as medicine spread into her bloodstream. Myra's breathing steadied a little. Lyra looked shocked. No one, especially not a human officer, had ever shown her kindness. Rylan glared at the guards who were now watching from a distance. "You feed them expired rations," he said angrily. "Do you want them to die?" One guard shrugged. "They are slaves, human, who cares if they get sick?" Rylan stood up slowly. His fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His voice came out like a threat, low and dangerous. "Ikare." Silence filled the entire district. Even the machines seemed to stop for a moment. The guards exchanged nervous glances. No human officer had ever spoken like that before. Rylan looked down at Mira again, her small body still weak in Lyra's arms. Something in his heart twisted painfully. No child should look this fragile, this afraid. He knew the rules of the colony. He knew he was not allowed to interfere. But he also knew he could not walk away. He turned to Lyra and spoke softly. "Come with me." Lyra's eyes widened with fear. "If we leave this area, they will punish us," she whispered. Rylan shook his head. "No one will touch you while I am here," he said, his voice steady and firm. He picked up Mira gently, holding her as if she were precious. Lyra hesitated for 1 second, then followed him. The guards watched, confused and unsure. They knew something dangerous was beginning. Something that might break the old rules of the colony. Something that might change everything. As Rylan carried Mira through the dark corridor, he whispered to himself, "This ends today. and the colony suddenly felt different, as if a storm was finally coming. Captain Rylan moved quickly through the dim corridors, holding the small, weak body of Mira in his arms. Lyra walked beside him, always looking behind her in fear. The metal floors shook with the vibrations of heavy machinery, and the lights flickered like dying stars. Rylan kept his steps steady, trying not to show his rising anger. He had seen cruelty before, but nothing like this. Nothing like a child being forced to eat spoiled food while guards laughed. His hands tightened protectively around Mira. He whispered softly, "You're safe now," even though danger still surrounded them like a silent shadow. They reached a locked door near the lower service sector. Rylan pressed his badge against the scanner, and the door slid open with a hiss. Inside was a small supply room filled with boxes of medical kits and emergency rations. This room was rarely monitored, which made it the safest place he could think of. He laid Mira gently on a metal table and turned to Lyra. "Close the door," he said quietly. Lyra hurried to shut it, her hands shaking as she pushed the heavy panel into place. Rylan opened a clean water canister and gave it to Lyra. "Let her drink slowly," he instructed. Lyra lifted Myra's head and touched the cup to her lips. Mira swallowed weakly, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. She looked at Rylan with confusion and fear. She had only seen humans from a distance, and most of them were silent or strict. But this human had kind eyes. Eyes that did not treat her like a slave. Rylan placed a medical patch on Myra's wrist. "It will help her body fight the poison," he said. Lyra stared at him for a long moment, unable to speak. Finally, she asked in a trembling voice, "Why are you helping us?" Rylan paused, thinking about the right words. "Because no one should suffer like this," he replied. "Not a child, not anyone." Lyra lowered her head, overwhelmed. For years she had believed that kindness no longer existed. But this human officer was breaking every rule she knew. He was risking his career, maybe even his life, just to protect her and her daughter. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the halls. Rylan's eyes snapped to the ceiling speakers. The colony's security system was announcing a search in the lower sectors. "Unauthorized access detected," the mechanical voice repeated. Lyra grabbed Mira and looked at Rylan in fear. "Did they find us?" she whispered. Rylan shook his head slowly. "Not yet, but they are getting close." The sound of marching boots echoed in the distance. Rylan quickly checked the hallway through a small window in the door. 2 patrol squads were moving toward their direction, scanning every room. "We cannot stay here," he said, his voice firm. He looked around the supply room and stopped at a ventilation grate near the floor. It was small but large enough for Lyra and Mira. He knelt beside it and began unscrewing the bolts. "Get inside, both of you," he said urgently. Lyra hesitated. "What about you?" Rylan looked her in the eyes. "I will lead them away," he said softly. "I won't let them find you." Fear tightened Lyra's chest. "You will be punished," she whispered. Rylan gave a faint smile. "I've been punished before," he said. "This is nothing." He removed the grate and helped Mira inside first. The girl was weak but conscious enough to grab Lyra's hand. Lyra crawled into the narrow shaft behind her daughter. Rylan replaced the grate loosely so they could escape later. He stepped back and inhaled deeply, preparing himself. The door suddenly shook as someone tried to force it open. Rylan straightened his uniform and activated the room's lights. He wanted it to look like he was inspecting supplies. The door slid open and 3 guards stormed in. "Captain," one guard said, surprised, "we detected unauthorized access here." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "And you think I caused it?" he asked calmly. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. "No sir, we were just checking." Rylan stepped aside, pretending to let them inspect the room. He stood directly in front of the ventilation grate, blocking it with his body. One guard approached him. "Did you see anyone?" Rylan leaned forward slightly. "No," he said firmly, "and if you continue disturbing my inspection, I will report you for interfering with an officer." The guard stepped back quickly. "Apologies, Captain," he said nervously. The patrol searched for a few seconds, but Rylan's presence made them uncomfortable. No one dared question him again. Finally, they left the room and continued down the hall. Rylan waited until their footsteps faded completely. He returned to the vent and tapped the grate softly. "It's safe," he whispered. Lyra pushed the grate open from the inside and crawled out with Mira. Her breathing was shaky, but her eyes were filled with relief. Rylan handed her a small bag of clean rations. "You need to stay hidden for now," he said. "But this won't end until we expose what they are doing here." Lyra looked confused. "Expose?" she asked. Rylan nodded. There is more than just bad food, he said. There is a whole system built to keep you suffering. Lyra felt a cold shiver run through her body. Mira clung to her mother's arm. Rylan stood tall, his expression hardening with determination. From the hallway the alarms were still ringing. The colony was searching for something. But they had no idea that a storm was already forming. A storm in the shape of one human who refused to look away. Rylan led Lyra and Mira through a narrow maintenance tunnel that ran behind the supply rooms. The metallic walls were covered in dust, wires hung loosely, and the air was warm and heavy. Lyra held Mira close, feeling her daughter's heartbeat slowly getting stronger. But fear remained in her eyes. She did not understand why this human was risking so much. She only knew that he was their only hope now. Rylan stopped at another door and scanned his badge. The door slid open, revealing a dark control room filled with old screens. This place is rarely used, Rylan whispered. We will be safe for a moment. He guided them inside and shut the door quietly. The room hummed with the low sound of running servers. Old cables lay across the floor like snakes. Dust floated in the weak blue light of a single flickering screen. Rylan moved quickly to the central monitor and began typing. His fingers flew across the console as he accessed colony records. Lyra watched him nervously. What are you doing? She asked. Rylan did not look away from the screen. Finding out how deep this corruption goes, he said. Folder after folder opened, revealing disturbing data. Rows of names, food logs, medical reports, and punishment orders. Mira sat on a crate, swinging her legs slowly but still weak. Rylan clicked on a file labeled Slave Group C. Lyra stepped closer, recognizing some of the faces on the screen. Families, workers, children. People she once knew. People who had disappeared. Rylan scrolled slowly, his jaw tightening with every line he read. They are starving thousands on purpose, he muttered. Lyra gasped softly, her voice trembling. Why? Rylan opened another file. The header made his stomach twist. Transfer list for underground market. He scrolled further. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Her own name appeared on the list. And below it, Myra's. Her legs shook and she grabbed the edge of a table to stay standing. Mira looked at her mother, confused. Mama? She whispered. Lyra knelt and hugged her tightly, tears filling her eyes. They were going to sell us, she said in a broken whisper. Rylan's hands froze over the console. He closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the rising anger inside him. This colony had been hiding crimes under the eyes of the galaxy. And now he had proof. He opened a communication channel and typed a secured message to Human Command. Requesting permission to intervene, slave mistreatment confirmed, urgent, he wrote. He waited for a reply, staring at the blinking cursor. Lyra watched him with hope. She thought the humans would help because Rylan was one of them. But when the reply finally arrived, Rylan's face darkened. The message was short and cold. Do not interfere, maintain protocol, avoid involvement in alien internal affairs. Lyra saw the change in his expression. What did they say? She asked quietly. Rylan closed the message window. They said nothing we can use, he replied softly. Lyra felt her hope collapse inside her chest. Even the humans would not help her. Except this one. This one who stood in front of her now, looking like a storm ready to break. Rylan turned back to the console and began copying all the files onto a portable data chip. If Command would not act, he would find another way. But before he could finish, the screen flashed red. Unauthorized access detected. A loud alarm blared outside, echoing through the metal corridors. Lyra jumped, startled. They found us, she whispered in panic. Rylan removed the chip quickly and placed it inside his uniform. We have to move, he said. He opened the side door leading back into the maintenance tunnels. But the sound of marching boots was already approaching. Dozens of soldiers were flooding the lower levels. The governor had ordered a full lockdown. Rylan guided Lyra and Mira down the tunnel at a fast pace. Mira clung to her mother's arm, trying to keep up. The air grew hotter as they passed steam pipes. Shadows moved on the walls as patrol lights scanned the area. Rylan stopped near a large circular hatch. This leads to the old recycling sector, he said. No one uses it anymore. He unlocked it and pushed it open with effort. A wave of warm, foul-smelling air rushed out. But it was still safer than staying behind. They stepped inside the abandoned sector. Broken machines lay scattered across the floor. Old conveyor belts hung from the ceiling. The place felt forgotten by time. Rylan checked another monitor on the wall. A message flashed across it. Governor Tarek orders all units to locate the human officer immediately. Lyra looked at Rylan shocked. They are hunting you, she said. Rylan nodded calmly. They want the evidence I took, he replied. Mira tugged at Rylan's sleeve. Will they hurt you? She whispered. Rylan knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. No, he said gently, because I won't let them. He stood up and turned to Lyra. We need to expose these crimes to the galaxy, he said. If we don't, they will keep hurting other families. Lyra nodded, tears forming again. But how? She asked. Rylan looked toward the old emergency lift at the far end of the room. We go up, he said, to the main comm tower. He inhaled deeply, preparing himself. The alarms continued to echo through the colony like a warning drum. A mother and daughter were once powerless, but now they were standing beside a human who refused to look away. And the entire colony was about to feel the consequences. The abandoned recycling sector was dark and silent. Only the distant echo of alarms reminded them that danger was spreading across the colony. Metal scraps lay scattered on the dusty floor, and broken machines cast long shadows in the dim red emergency light. Rylan kept Mira close to his side as he guided Lyra toward the emergency lift. His senses were sharp, listening for every footstep and mechanical click in the distance. Lyra held Myra's small hand tightly. Fear trembled in her voice as she whispered, Rylan, they will find us soon. Rylan shook his head as he examined the old lift controls. Not if we move fast, he said. He pressed a sequence of buttons and the lift door creaked open slowly. The air inside was warm and smelled of old wiring. But it was their only path upward. Just as they stepped inside, a loud explosion echoed from nearby. The ground shook beneath their feet. A burst of smoke rushed through the tunnel entrance behind them. Lyra froze in fear, pulling Mira close. Rylan quickly pushed them deeper into the lift. That was too close, he muttered. He slammed the door shut and activated the manual control lever. The lift jerked upward with a rough metallic groan. As they ascended, small sparks flickered from the ceiling. The old machinery struggled to carry their weight. Mira held onto her mother tightly, her wide eyes reflecting the red warning lights. Lyra tried to calm her, whispering soft words. But her own voice shook with fear. Halfway up, the lift suddenly stopped. A grinding noise echoed above them. Rylan tapped the control panel, but nothing responded. They shut down the power in this sector, he said quietly. Lyra looked around nervously. What do we do now? She asked. Rylan spotted a maintenance hatch on the ceiling of the lift. We climb, he said firmly. He pushed the hatch open and pulled himself through. The shaft above them was narrow but climbable. He reached down and helped Lyra lift Mira up first. Then he pulled Lyra to safety. The metal ladder inside the shaft felt shaky and old, but they had no choice. They climbed slowly, the metal echoing beneath their hands and feet. Sweat dripped from Rylan's forehead as he kept an ear on the sounds below. Voices began to rise from the lower levels. Guards were entering the recycling sector. Their boots hammered against the floor like marching thunder. Hurry, Rylan said, trying to keep his voice calm. Lyra climbed faster, pushing herself despite her trembling arms. Mira clung to her mother's back, holding tight like a small frightened bird. Finally, they reached another hatch near the top. Rylan pushed it open and peeked into the corridor above. Bright lights flooded his eyes. But the hall was clear. He helped Lyra and Mira out of the shaft, and they all collapsed quietly onto the metal floor. The corridor was part of the upper maintenance ring, rarely patrolled. They took a moment to breathe. Mira leaned her head against Rylan's shoulder, exhausted. But the moment of peace ended quickly. A sharp alarm sounded overhead. A mechanical voice shouted. Human officer detected. Sector lockdown initiated. Lyra's eyes widened in terror. They know where we are, she whispered. Rylan nodded grimly. They are tracking my badge signal. Without hesitation, he removed his badge and smashed it against the wall. It shattered into pieces, sparks flying across the floor. That will slow them down, he said. They ran down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the sterile metal hallway. The emergency lights painted everything in shades of red. Warning signs flashed across every screen they passed. Security breach. All units mobilize. Capture the human officer alive. They reached a large set of double doors that led into the cargo bay. Rylan placed his hand on the scanner. The door slid open, revealing a massive room filled with crates, hoverlifters, and metal walkways. Dark smoke drifted from the far end of the bay. Flames flickered in the shadows from a recent explosion. This place is unstable, Lyra said, stepping back. Rylan shook his head. It's our only path to the comm tower. They moved along the walkway, avoiding broken sections of the floor. Heat radiated from a large fire burning near the central machines. Sparks rained down like falling stars. Mira coughed softly as smoke filled the air. Rylan lifted her into his arms again. "We're almost there," he whispered. Suddenly, a group of armed guards appeared on the upper platform, their weapons aimed at Rylan. "Captain Rylan," the lead guard shouted, "surrender now and the aliens will be returned to their cage." Lyra gasped and stepped back. Rylan shielded her and Mira with his body. "You will not touch them," he said coldly. The guard smirked. "You are alone, human," he replied. "You cannot save them." Rylan reached into his belt and pulled out a small plasma cutter. "I don't need to fight you," he said. "I just need to get through." He pointed the cutter at the walkway's control panel. With a sharp burst of light, the panel exploded. The entire walkway collapsed behind them, cutting off the guard's path. Rylan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her forward as metal crashed loudly into the fire below. Smoke thickened, making it hard to breathe. But the exit was close. Rylan led them through a narrow maintenance door on the side of the cargo bay. Once inside, they collapsed against the wall, coughing. Their clothes smelled of smoke and their faces were streaked with ash. Lyra looked at Rylan with wide, grateful eyes. "You saved us again," she whispered. Rylan shook his head. "We're not safe yet," he said. "The governor will send more guards." Mira tugged at his sleeve weakly. "Why are they chasing us?" she asked. Rylan knelt beside her. "Because I took the truth," he said, "and they are afraid of it." He stood and looked down the dark corridor ahead. "That tower is our only chance," he said firmly. Lyra nodded, taking Myra's hand. They followed Rylan deeper into the shadows. Behind them, the colony burned brighter. And every explosion reminded them that the final confrontation was coming. Rylan led Lyra and Mira through the dark maintenance corridor. Their footsteps echoed softly, mixing with the distant alarms and the crackling sound of distant fires. The whole colony felt unstable, as if it were holding its breath before a storm. Rylan knew they had only one chance left. If they reached the main communication tower, he could broadcast everything. Every crime, every name, every hidden file. If the galaxy saw the truth, the governor could not silence them anymore. Lyra held Mira close as they followed him up a steep stairway. Her heart thumped loudly, but she forced herself to stay strong. She had already lost everything once, and she would not let fear take her daughter again. Mira walked with small, tired steps, but she did not complain. She trusted Rylan now. He had become the shield between her and the darkness of the colony. At the top of the stairs, a narrow door opened into a bright, circular chamber. Tall screens lined the walls and glowing wires ran along the floor like veins. This was the heart of the colony's communication network. Rylan walked straight to the main console and pulled out the data chip he had taken earlier. Lyra watched him carefully, her eyes filled with worry. "Will this work?" she asked quietly. Rylan nodded. "If I can connect this to the central beacon, every human ship in this region will see the truth," he said. He inserted the chip and began typing quickly. Lines of data flashed across the screens. Images of starving families, punishment records, transfer lists. Everything the governor tried to bury was now rising to the surface. Rylan's fingers moved fast, but a part of him knew this would attract attention. Down below, heavy doors slammed open. Security squads marched toward the tower. Their weapons glowed as they formed a perimeter around the base. The governor himself stepped forward, his voice echoing through the speakers. "Captain Rylan," the governor announced, "you have one chance to surrender." Rylan ignored him and continued uploading the files. Lyra grabbed Mira and hid behind a console. Her heart screamed with fear. Mira held her mother tightly, whispering softly, "Mama, will he be okay?" Lyra looked at Rylan, her eyes full of silent hope. "I believe he will," she whispered. The governor's voice grew angrier. "You are committing treason against this colony," he shouted. "Give me the child and her mother at once." Rylan finally turned toward the screen. His voice was calm but sharp. "You don't own anyone," he said. "Not anymore." He pressed the final command. The beacon tower lit up with bright blue energy. A powerful signal burst outward like a wave of light. The files were being broadcast across all nearby systems. Every human ship, every station, every channel. All of them now saw the truth of Vorth Prime. The governor roared with anger. "Fire on the tower," he ordered. Explosions shook the walls. Energy blasts hit the outer structure, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The tower lights flickered. Mira screamed and covered her ears. Lyra held her tightly, her heart pounding like a drum. Rylan ran toward them and shielded them with his body. "It's okay," he whispered, "I'm here." But the blasts grew louder. Suddenly the rumbling stopped. A high-pitched alarm echoed across the entire colony. Then a deep mechanical voice spoke. "Incoming human fleet, prepare for contact." Lyra gasped. Rylan exhaled a shaky breath. The message had reached them. Humanity was coming. And they were coming fast. Outside, the sky cracked open with bright blue streaks. Massive human warships emerged from hyperspace like giants stepping out of the clouds. The colony's defense towers tried to activate, but the human ships were too many. Too fast. Too strong. Laser fire lit up the sky as the first human cruiser dropped closer to the colony. A deep voice echoed from orbit. "This is Fleet Commander Arlen of the United Human Front. We have received evidence of illegal slave activity. All civilians stand down." The governor panicked. He ordered his guards to retreat. But it was too late. Human drop ships landed across the colony. Armed soldiers marched out in perfect formation. Their armor glowed with blue lights as they spread across the compound. They moved with confidence, precision, and purpose. Rylan helped Lyra and Mira to their feet. "You're safe now," he said softly. But Lyra shook her head. "You saved us," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my daughter, you saved all of us." Mira reached out and grabbed Rylan's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around his. "Don't leave us," she whispered. Rylan knelt down and hugged her gently. "I won't," he said quietly, "not until I know you're truly safe." Moments later, human soldiers entered the comm tower. They saluted Rylan when they saw him. "Captain," one of them said, "we're securing the colony." Rylan nodded, relieved. Lyra stood beside him, tears running down her cheeks. She could finally breathe without fear. She could finally believe in safety. In hope. In a future. Outside, the fires died slowly. The cries of fear turned into cries of relief. Families emerged from hiding. Human medics rushed to help them. The nightmare was ending. Because one human refused to look away. As Rylan, Lyra, and Mira stepped out of the tower together, the rising dawn lit the sky in soft shades of gold. And for the first time in a long time, Lyra whispered words she thought she would never say again. "We are free."